Welcome to the IBM Blue Box Overview and Demonstration. IBM Blue Box is the fastest path to private cloud. We deliver a single-tenant implementation of OpenStack on dedicated hardware, with no proprietary software added on top. Blue Box Cloud delivers the best of both worlds by delivering private cloud as a service. It's your cloud, our hardware, or your cloud in our data center. For the purpose of this discussion, let's define public cloud as shared hardware regardless of location. So imagine AWS, imagine Rackspace, Azure, and SoftLayer. Private cloud can be defined as single-tenant hardware regardless of location. So it is a complete standalone implementation of a cloud dedicated to one customer. Blue Box Cloud is private cloud as a service. We define and implement a single-tenant implementation of OpenStack just for you. That can be partitioned any way you want among your internal business customers. It is important to define Blue Box Cloud as private cloud as a service because it avoids many of the pitfalls that currently plague public cloud and private cloud today. For example, in public cloud, you often have shared hardware and shared resources. If one of the co-tenants on the hardware where you're hosted gets an unexpected spike in traffic or draw, then you can be deprived of the service you expect and pay for. Private cloud is hugely powerful, but usually requires a lot of internal expertise and a core competency in running infrastructure that may not be applicable or appropriate for your organization to take on as a technical burden. Using OpenStack as a service, as delivered by Blue Box Cloud, enables you to take advantage of the power of open source technologies while not having to become an expert in running a technology written by thousands of code contributors. IBM has a long history of supporting open source technologies. IBM and Blue Box together have been massive contributors to the OpenStack community. In the October release of OpenStack, we contributed 280,000 lines of code. Based on this long-standing support of the community, we fundamentally believe that it's inappropriate to utilize an open source technology through a proprietary distribution. We're delivering OpenStack as a service because we think that is the way to stay as close as possible to community support and stay committed to the idea and the concept of open standards. To support this belief, Blue Box is delivered using the latest stable implementation of OpenStack that we deem ready for production deployment. We typically run 3 to 6 months behind the most current implementation of OpenStack, and we update our customers' cloud operating system upon pre-approval of a maintenance window. Blue Box Cloud wins when discussing private cloud because we're highly secure and backed by dedicated hardware. This delivers complete control and an ability to create custom virtual machine sizes within OpenStack and a complete dedication of the CPU resources and disk and RAM on the underlying hardware. No oversubscription and drawbacks that come with it. Also, Blue Box delivers operational excellence across the board because we do this every day. We run OpenStack at scale for customers all over the world, and you can be one of them. So now I'd like to launch into a demo of Blue Box Cloud. Some of you may recognize the user interface as Horizon because it is a truly unedited version of the OpenStack UI. So now let's launch the demo and move to the Horizon UI. First, we are going to log in as an administrative user. Administrators are able to create projects, create users, assign quotas, and create base images for users to deploy as virtual machines. A project is a group of resources that can be assigned to a user or a group of users. Projects are assigned quotas, which limit the total resources that can be consumed from that private cloud. The quotas are limits to resource consumption, and they are not an allocation of available resources. Here we are going to create a new project called Blue Box. We are going to customize the quota we allocate to this project. In this example, the Blue Box project is assigned a limit of 48 virtual CPUs. We can also set limits on the number of block storage volumes or snapshots that this project can use. We are going to keep the default values for the remaining options except for the total size of volumes and snapshots, to which we are going to assign a limit of 1.5 terabytes. We are also going to update the RAM quota for the project. Today, we are going to assign this group a total limit of 96 gigs of RAM. Now it's time to create a new user for our Blue Box project. We're going to name the user John Smith. Let's set the password and assign the JSmith user to the Blue Box project. We're going to assign the role of member to this user because we do not want to give this user administrative control over the entire private cloud. In OpenStack, a flavor is a template for describing the resource configuration of a virtual machine. As an administrator, we can create a custom flavor to precisely size CPU, memory, and disk consumption of a virtual machine. In this case, we will create a custom flavor and assign 2 virtual CPU cores, along with 2 gigs of RAM and 20 gigs of ephemeral disk. We can also limit flavors to a specific project if we want to do so. For this flavor, we will restrict access to the Blue Box project only. No other projects in this cloud will be able to use this custom flavor. Now that the project and user are created, we will log out as the administrative user and use the JSmith user that we just created to log back into the cluster. This user has control and ability to view only the assigned project that we just created, but they will not see any of the administrative controls that we just looked at. This user has control over their assigned projects, but they do not see the administrative controls for the cluster. This user has the ability to see all of the images that were published by the administrative users. These images are curated by the administrative users of the cluster. Administrators can preload the images with corporate antivirus packages, monitoring software, or other operating system patches. We are now going to launch a new instance using a curated image. This image was preloaded and pre-configured by the administrators of the private cloud. The name of this new instance will be BB App 1. The size of the instance is based on the hardware template or flavor that we created earlier in this demonstration. When you select a flavor, the user receives immediate feedback on whether there is enough quota or available resources remaining to allow this machine to be built. If the user attempts to exceed quota, they will see overconsumption visually before attempting to spawn the instances. Here we are selecting the newly created flavor to launch our instance. And now we will move to the Access and Security tab. As this is a new cluster, there are no SSH key pairs added. We will be using password authentication to access this new instance, but the users are able to use their own SSH key pairs for passwordless access if necessary. As we move to the Networking tab, you'll also notice that there is only a single network to choose from because we haven't yet built any VLANs. We will select the internal network. Now we can launch this new instance. The launch times of instances are highly dependent on the size of the base operating system. Typically, they take less than 15 seconds, but larger operating systems can take a minute or two to spawn. There is a software-based firewall which must be opened before the instance can receive external traffic. We are going to add a new security group, and we are going to add a single rule which will allow traffic destined for port 22 to reach the virtual machines which are members of this security group. We will now edit our newly created VM and add it to our newly created security group. Just because a VM has a security group that allows access across a particular port, that does not mean that it can receive internet traffic. This virtual machine will now be assigned a floating IP address. Floating IP addresses are used to assign a publicly routable internet address to a specific instance. Because this is a new project, the project doesn't have any preloaded floating IPs. We'll grab an IP address from the pool and then allocate that IP address to the virtual machine. Switching over to the terminal, you can verify that the VM does have access. Let's assume that this new machine needs a separate block storage volume assigned to it. We're going to create a new storage volume. We will assign this new storage volume 5 gigs. Next, we will assign that 5 gig volume to our newly created VM. The block volume will be assigned to the next available virtual device. This volume can now be formatted and mounted inside the instance. As you can see, the volume has been mounted successfully. This concludes the demonstration of IBM Blue Box and the Horizon UI. Thanks for watching. And that concludes the IBM Blue Box demo. For more information, visit blueboxcloud.com.